and welcome today to Commissioner's Corner, where my guest is none other than Dr. Brook Bello of More to Life. Dr. Bello,
Hi,
I'm so
Mayor.
very happy to have you here today, period, just today. We have so very much to talk about.
Yes, sir.
And your efforts and the energy that you have brought to this area in the last 6 years has had transforming endings and great beginnings.
Yes.
Let's go back a while. First, let's identify what More to Life is and describe it to our audience today.
Well, More to Life, named by Mara Vanderslice Kelly of United Way Worldwide, anti-human trafficking arm, is an anti-human trafficking, sexual violence, and youth crime prevention organization. We work and deal with all of the root causes of sexual violence, human trafficking, and not just sex slavery and prostitution, but all forms of human trafficking, domestic servitude, labor trafficking, and farm trafficking.
You know, for many of us, we really didn't understand the level or the gravity of human trafficking in the area of servitude until the early 90s. We saw very big evidence of it in Kuwait during the Kuwait and the Gulf War, and at the same time we started to see some of our officials having persons in their servitude. Today, here in the state of Florida, human trafficking is on the uprise, should I say?
Yes, Mayor.
And in our very own area, I know that in Sarasota County, we've had some outstanding casework on your behalf to go into some of these areas where we've identified human trafficking. You've even put certain procedures in place where your work is being done. Can you just reflect upon that briefly? Let's go back a few years and come forward since being here and the role that you have played in identifying and bringing this to another level of understanding. What difference are we seeing here in the county of Sarasota and Manatee, because you work both and you work throughout?
Yeah, the 12th Judicial District, but the main victim services that we provide are right here in Sarasota County and Manatee County. I think, knowing that the Tampa Bay region in and of itself is, depending how the number fluctuates, around 14 in the nation, and that, stats are great. I love stats, but no one knows exactly. But according to National Human Trafficking Resource Center, we can say that it's high. You have Miami, you have the 12th Judicial Districts, you have towns where there are waterways and gateways to shipping, international travel, tourism. You're going to see a high propensity of different forms of human trafficking. And I think one of the unique things about the state of Florida, who's done some incredible things to combat this horrendous crime, is that over 90% of all the farm trafficking in the entire United States, and farm trafficking is a big deal that Homeland Security is dealing with, is in the state of Florida. And so wherever you see labor trafficking, domestic trafficking farm, you're going to see sex trafficking. And just to be clear, some people think, well, I thought trafficking meant that you had to cross a county line or a municipality, but that's not the case. Some of the victims that we've served right here in our county never left their room. We have a domestic violence victim who was locked in a room for 14 years here, unidentified, that came to us through another agency. And she is actually getting ready to graduate Le Cordon Bleu in Miami.
Oh, great.
You're talking about years of sexual violence abuse and domestic servitude. We have girls that were repeatedly raped in a room by a family member from 3 years old, 5 years old, 6 years old, in this county and even in the state, all the way to 15, 16, 18, 20, even impregnated by that individual. And so that is a form of human trafficking, familial sex slavery. And some of the exciting things I love about being here is that the support of the Attorney General in terms of some of the legislative practices, Spano, who's congressman in the Tampa area, Senator Latvala over in the West Palm Beach area, and Senator Flores over in Miami, that work to establish bills that we have really fought for and worked on that affect us right here in our county. For instance, I actually added language to House Bill 369 and lobbied for that for a year. And the Junior League of Tampa was really instrumental in assisting with that. But what's exciting about that is that bill had nothing pertaining to sex slavery. And going back and forth and arguing that, they didn't add that, but they added prostitution. And because prostitution is a prevalent thing that's been happening for years, and some people consider it the oldest profession in the world, but it is not a profession, it's a federal crime, and many of our young girls and boys are being indoctrinated into that because of issues of poverty and homelessness.
Let's just take a moment and let us realize that your conversation for the last 3 minutes has been on Sarasota County, the regional area from Tampa to, again, Sarasota.
Because the lines are so, when we have an issue here, this young person has undoubtedly been in Tampa.
Sure.
Or they've been in Miami. So we provide services here, and the victims of here, and sometimes they leave and they come back home, and so we serve them.
When we start this, and you are evident involved with a number of other organizations.
Yes, great partners
that have worked this month, being Child Protection and Abuse Month of Recognition. Your efforts broadens itself to where we're now dealing with the male, the individual, not just the victim, but the person who creates the carnage. And yours has moved in an area that many haven't.
Yes.
To do that. Can you speak just a bit on that? Because I know, I think it was last year you and I spoke some time ago, and there were several incidences that you were dealing with males in this area that had been the perpetrators.
Yeah, histories of pedophilia and registered sex offenders and those prosecuted for purchasing of commercial sexual exploitation. I think that, which is prostitution.
Yes.
We have a passion for fathers. I'm a survivor of human trafficking.
Hold it. Stop. Let's stop right there.
So,
because it becomes a bit gratifying, and I thank you for being who you are, bold enough and brave enough, and the courage to do what you do, having been subjected to some of this carnage. I like getting it from the horse's mouth, per se. I can hear.
I like horses.
I can read. I can read. I can watch. But trauma coming from an outside source doesn't always meet the trauma where the trauma began and worked. Yours has been an evolving process for quite some time. You have, in your bio, you've traveled speaking, but most people that do speak are not always, many of the persons speaking have never been the victim. They are learned, but here we have a whole different experience when I talk to you.
Yes, and we at More Life use the word champion.
Champion.
And we work with our girls, our boys, up to 1,500 kids locally, and a ton of women in our safe house and our educational curriculum. And we say at More to Life, Mayor, and I honor you for allowing me to share with this beautiful city and county today. We say victim to survivor, survivor to thriver, and thriver to champion. And the beauty about that is that I believe that we're born for greatness. I believe that when this happens to a child, or there's a predisposition to being violated and they're having trouble in school, and no one has identified, why is that child having trouble in school? They're throwing things or acting up. Not always do we take the time to listen and to watch and to victim identify, which is an educational process we teach, that the child is being profoundly sexually violated at home, human trafficked at home, sometimes passed around from family member to family member or father to friend.
Yes. We
have many of these cases. By the time they hit 16, they change. There's a volatileness, there's an anger, and it's easy then for a quote-unquote outside of the home or community trafficker to come in and say, hey, and they look for that weakness. Even
Sure.
the book, which I recommend everyone read, called Pimpology, one of the rules is to find someone with a weakness and to perpetuate that weakness, if not create one. And it's always with someone who's been previously broken, because over 90% of prostituted individuals on the North Trail and anywhere in the United States have been sexually violated as a child. And that's the same for young boys. But I always say that men are the biggest problem to this issue, because over 90% of the violators, and I think that they're the biggest part of the solution. I honor my father. I honor men of honor.
Sure.
And men have the biggest role to play, because every child that we have worked with has said, I've never really had a dad that loved me, or a man of honor. And the young men who are perpetrating that we talk to, no one's ever given me the rite of passage. No one's ever told me what being a man is. I learned it from my buddy. How old is he? 15. Okay, that's a problem, because he's broken, his father's incarcerated, and they're in a clique together, so it creates an issue. And so in closing the sentence out, the legacy of fatherhood and us lobbying for House Bill 465, which was a mandatory educational process for those who are busted for sexual violence and commercial CSEC, commercial exploitation and prostitution, have to go through the More to Life educational process, which we call restorative justice in demand education.
And that time frame differs because of the individual, or
the time frame in terms of
that reformation of an individual that's going through
well,
More to Life.
A lot of people think it's a diversion program. If these guys have to do time in jail, if it's a first offense or second offense or whatever it is, it's not a diversion program. It is something post-jail sentencings, or they didn't get jail time. They just got probation because they were caught in a sting. They actually didn't commit the act, but they were about to. Money exchange hands. And in terms of human trafficking, forced fraud, or coercion, money does not have to exchange hands. You know, a paperclip, anything can exchange hands that's for the profit of the other person. So there's a case, where an ice cream shake exchanged hand. The guy got 25 years. So they have to go through our 8-hour course, and they have to spend an hour with us every week for 90 days in follow-ups. And not one man, they come into the class pretty scared, feeling pretty guilty, but we don't beat them up. At the end, I shake their hand, and we talk about real change. We talk about what does it mean to be a man of honor. Here, we break the myth of prostitution being the oldest profession in the world by creating a job post for a young girl who's looking for that for a life goal. And at the end of the class, they're in tears. What about my son? I didn't know. I'm having these other issues. Then we can lead them to other resources and therapists if there's a deeper issue of sexual violence.
Well, let's back about 4 sentences ago.
Sure.
And in that sentence, you use the sons that are the sons of an incarcerated or having been incarcerated individual. How and where does that cycle break? In our
Mentoring Leadership Academy, we're just submit our application to Paul Sutton, and we're partnering now with Robert O. Taylor to do our Leadership Academy. And a lot of young boys don't have a rite of passage anymore.
Sure.
When we go to Compass and we talk to the kids, they say, well, has anyone taught you how to be a dad? No, my dad's in jail, or he left when I was 2. I don't know him. So there's no rites of passage. No one gives them the keys to the kingdom of, I'm a man now. Okay. And so the cycle, here's some national statistics. From the ages of 14 to 16, if you have an incarcerated parent or no father there, the propensity for criminal activity and suicide goes up 60%. Between the ages of 14 and 16 and 18, it goes up 400%. And so someone who is in a fatherless home or an incarcerated parent or all these other points of impact, or an addicted parent or an alcoholic parent or divorced, and you stack the deck, or you come from a family where the mother's been sexually violated, or you've been sexually violated, according to Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Medicine, you have all these points of impact stacked against you that cause behavioral and psychological trauma. And the trauma doesn't always show up because the brain doesn't develop to a child is 24 to 26. And so we identify high-risk youth. That's hence the term high risk, highly vulnerable. And we go in and we begin to talk about those issues and, apprenticeship programs, leadership programs, educational programs, and give them a safe place to share. We're going to be doing that at Robert O. Taylor when the Olympiads come in town, and have a table there, and every week with Bruni and the great things she's doing with Hard Knocks, to partner with Chief DePino and the program New Beginnings 2, which she put me director over, to get youth engaged and identify the ones that are having severe issues so we can pull them over and then create a graduation and a rites of passage.
And that rites of passage, you use the word youth. So now we didn't just use the male. When you use youth, you're using both. Because in the same place, our young women very much don't always step into motherhood.
Right.
In the proper setting that they should, or we would really like to.
Sure.
So when we start seeing these behavioral changes, we will see cultural changes, and these areas that we're dealing with are not just on the lower economic spectrum.
By no means. As a matter of fact, not the same in Atlanta, New York, depends on what region you're in.
Sure.
But in this region, my husband is Irish-Italian, and I come from a family that is embracing to all cultures. I have a passion for people, and I don't care what your background is. And so the girls that we serve predominantly, and the young boys, are 65% Caucasian. Other parts of the country, you might see 65% African American. Certain parts in border towns, you might see 50% Hispanic. But here, there's a high propensity of Caucasian girls, and the economic status between them could be anywhere to lower economic status in terms of home finances. It could be middle, and it could even be an affluent family where it's highly educated and they're into the six figures. Because of this disease, this illness, this virus of human trafficking, doesn't really care where you come from. It just wants to violate your child.
And human trafficking, one of the greatest subjects that's out here right now, because some would say drug culture, but that is not necessarily so.
It's a part of it.
It's a part of, but not necessarily the driver, because it has...
Well, let's say this. Over 60% of the trafficking done in the United States, according to the State Department, is now gang trafficking. And what constitutes a gang is 3 or more persons, and it could be a gang, it could be a gang association, or a subset of a gang. And so kids that come from fatherless homes, boys and girls, have a propensity to be drawn toward large groups of people who say, well, I will be your daddy, I will be your family, you'll never be alone again. And so within that clique, there is petty theft, there are other criminal activities such as gun trafficking, drug trafficking, and drugs. And oftentimes, in order to keep a victim there, you're addicted to drugs. And for instance, when I was taken as a child, I was injected with drugs. I had never done drugs. I was a straight A student and athlete, come from a high middle class family, and I'm injected with heroin. I had never, had a sip of a beer. So being raped simultaneously by a group of guys under the same process when I'm drugged is a shocker to the mind of a young individual. And what's so sad, Mayor, is that Leslie Loveless and all those amazing people at Suncoast Partnership to End Homelessness that we work with, we understand that some of the young people on the North Trail, this has been their life up until the point when we see them completely out of it, walking that trail. And not having discovered who they really are.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm a bit befuddled because when we look at our social issues, we're not encompassing the human trafficking role as a part of the bigger picture. We're very tunnel in our visioning. We're not looking at the broader picture here, the bigger picture.
Yes,
to
sir.
say, before we can identify one, we have to identify all as being the one.
Right.
Because when we look at what the spokes in this wheel, you will find all of them coming to the same center point, and there are multiplicity of these outside influences that we're not discussing. We don't as readily see a commercial on a television station. We don't see and hear a talk that will encompass or deal with human trafficking as a symposium or a national television conversation.
You're right, and when I keynoted at the White House on this issue from Florida, I was the one of your citizens who was invited to the White House to keynote and do the all-day think tank with all the administrations there. And I was with President Jimmy Carter doing the same thing last year, and talking about the great things we're doing here in Florida, but the stuff that still has to be done. And I think that sexual exploitation in and of itself is camouflaged in a highly sexualized society. And I don't think kids are having the opportunity to understand what sexually is. And a lot of marriages are failing because we have something now called gonzo pornography, and there are kids as young as 7, 8, 9. A little kid, for instance, we know a young boy, he's just, little Billy, let's say, playing with his Xbox, with his friends, just being a normal, happy kid, Xbox, ride a bike, not messing up too bad. Typical young boy, 8, 9 years old. He gets a pop-up on his Xbox, partial nude thing. His mom has kind of said something, but not necessarily strong enough because she doesn't know how deep the issue is. And so he puts it away, and then finally he clicks on it. And then he goes more, and he's addicted. And this is an epidemic. And gonzo porn is a sadistic style of porn, causes children to be very angry, very volatile, and very addicted to sex at an early age. And so we have cases where, a young boy will have raped his sister 50 times, and the parents didn't know. And so what I tell parents in the process of this, internet safety is key. We teach that at More to Life. It's really important to understand social media and for kids to understand predator behavior, because over 50% of human trafficking happens online, Snapchat, Facebook. So parents need to be very aware of what kids are doing on their smartphones, their tablets, and their computers. And as far as a nation, as far as a city, we have to understand anywhere where you see a strip club, anywhere where there's an escort service, anywhere where there's a massage parlor, you're going to see sexual addictions. And when you see sexual addictions, you're going to see prostitution. And where you see prostitution, you're going to see human trafficking, sex trafficking.
And when we started this conversation, you were saying that the boundaries are not borders that are identifiable when we move from city to city or region to region. People are moving throughout the state of Florida, especially in the workforce in some areas. How are we able to better identify what has taken place? Because Sarasota, for instance, doesn't have work camps, but our adjoining and neighboring Manatee has work camps, and people are on the very peripherals of our cities, but they are still yet a part of the trafficking syndrome, because we have persons from the inside of the city going outside or these persons outside being brought inside?
Right. I think, when you have a beautiful city like this, a tourist town especially, you may not have the work camps, but tourism in and of itself brings a lot of criminal activity, those on the outside and those on the inside. Moving across the state of Florida, which is at a high level, one of the states that is has a major issue of unidentified youth criminals or youth victims, and obviously criminals. Here's one of the things we have to understand. When I ask someone, I said, when you think of the word prostitute, what do you think of? Most people say, well, I think of this, girl standing on a corner. But when you think of prostitution, you have to think of a man sitting at his computer. Because for every one individual that's prostituted, trafficked on a given night, there are 7 to 10 individuals who purchase that person. And so understanding that, the Polaris Project, who worked with us on the bill here and had something to say when Senator Vala and Spano were here at our press conference, the See Something, Say Something campaign. When you see something unusual, you have to call More to Life. You have to call the National Human Trafficking Resource Center. You have to call the local police. You have to call the state attorney's office. You have to see something and you have to say something. And the House bill that we work on, which is the signage bill that goes into massage parlors and bus terminals, those signs are to go up this year, and they should go everywhere. And even though they're not mandated in all businesses, some businesses should go ahead to the Polaris Project and design a really nice sign for their bathrooms. Because in and of itself, most victims will find themselves on a happy day with the trafficker in a clothing store shopping. Because before he violates her or him, he'll take them shopping.
Sure. Let's come to the very close of this, and in doing so, I first want to thank you so very much.
Time flies.
It does. It always does. And whenever we get together, I'm most interested in how do we, as a city, help, and the signage that's going up is one of the areas I think we may better approach this. There will be further conversations on your part and my part, but for today, I want to thank you again. I want to thank More to Life. For those of you who have not read the book, Living Inside of the Rainbow, by Dr. Brook Bello, I would invite you to get a copy. It's here, it's local. You will find it most interesting and inspiring.
And I wanted to just mention a couple partners: Coastal Behavioral, Spark, Safe Children Coalition, Healthy Start. There's so many great organizations that we work closely with here that we could not do what we do.
Well, let's not forget SPD. We do want
and I was getting ready. I said Chief DePino earlier.
Yes, I know, but I wanted to make sure I got that in.
Definitely SPD and Sheriff Knight, the Sheriff's Department, very essential for all the work that we do.
Thank you again. Enjoy this portion of Commissioner's Corner. See you next time.